So let's talk about Thrasymachus' challenge, what it is, and what kind of evidence you can get for it. And Thrasymachus' challenge is just this. He says, well, look, you know, Polemarchus here is on the right track, challenging, the, the thoughts about justice that most people have, you know, like I said, justice is a really important, maybe the central moral concept for ancient Greeks. You could probably just replace all this with morality and you wouldn't change the meaning, right? So if you read Thrasymachus as saying morality, being moral, being quote unquote good is not a good thing, I don't think you'd be misunderstanding him. So he's saying, look, justice, being moral is not a good thing. It's actually an underhanded system of control. The wise man, or you might say wised up man, right, which he really presents himself as, would reject justice and he would act unjustly whenever he can get away with it. Well, why does he say that? He says, well, look, what everyone calls justice is just whatever's in the advantage of the stronger. And Socrates presses him on this. He's like, what do you mean by stronger? Thrasymachus says, well, stronger is just whoever is in charge in a society. That's who are the stronger, people running the society are the quote unquote strong. That's the sense I'm using strong in, right? You'll see this in philosophy a lot of times. What exactly do you mean by this? Well, the strong, that is, whoever's in charge in society, will set the rules of justice, and those rules will benefit the strong, that is, whoever's in charge, at the expense of everyone else. And there's two parts to this. And the first part of this is just that those in charge will make the law. And they will punish you for breaking it. And they will set the law up to benefit themselves. But there's a deeper and I think more troubling part of this. And that is the thought that whoever's in charge will set the moral rules that we internalize, what we think of as acting well or badly. And Thrasymachus doesn't say this, but I think, he would endorse it and say, look, that's the really terrible thing here, right? Obviously, if people make the laws and they're going to punish you for breaking them, you should follow the law, especially when you're going to get caught, right? If the law says don't insult the king or we will kill you, a smart person is not going to go out there on the street, wait for the king's, whatever you call the king's thing, procession, parade, prancing, I don't know. Not, we don't have a king, thankfully. But anyway, if they say don't insult the king or we will execute you, obviously it would be a bad idea to wait till the king comes by and flip him off, right? Don't do that. That's not what he's saying a wise person will do. But he's saying, look, there's all these cases you could get away with breaking the law, doing something immoral even, and those in power, they get it so you internalize it and you have this little voice in your head saying, oh, it would be bad to do this. That's more what he's worried about anything. It's like, look, don't break the law when you're going to get in trouble. That's crazy. But you should act unjustly when you can get away with it. You should act immorally when you can get away with it, and it's in your interest. You should ignore that little voice that the powerful try to put in your head. What we see here is what philosophers have called the hermeneutics of suspicion. If you want a fancy term, keep this in mind. But, you don't need to know this, but if you encounter this term later on, this is what it means, right? And if you do want a fancy term from your college class to throw out, well, here's a fancy term, right? And the hermeneutics of suspicion is just this idea that morality is a sort of con job. Morality is an attempt by one group or groups to control another in an underhanded, manipulative way. In Thrasymachus' telling, it's whoever's in charge in society, the quote unquote strong, attempting to control everyone else through this moral code. there's other versions of this, right? But morality is supposed to be a con job, and the wise or wised up person will reject it and act immorally whenever he can get away with it. Freud, Nietzsche, and Marx, these other thinkers, other philosophers, Freud's more of a psychologist, but the lines are blurry, right? They will also present versions of this too, but Thrasymachus, who, he predates them. We're not so sure how much Thrasymachus is a real person or how much he's just a guy Plato invented, but either way, this suspicious take on morality way predates all of these guys. Plato also invented, just to geek out a little bit, Plato also was the first who came up with this idea that the human mind is divided into three parts. You might have heard Freud invented the idea of the subconscious. Anyone ever tells you that, I don't know. Maybe if they're your professor, don't tell them they're wrong to their face, or somebody who's grading you, but they are wrong. Plato very clearly knew, or at least thought, there was an unconscious way before Freud did. Freud seems to have pretty clearly stolen this idea from Plato. Plato even thought human mind is divided into three parts. That pretty well fit with Freud's ego, id, and superego, right? Plato came up with this more than 2,000 years before Freud ever lived. Anyway, I won't bang the table on this or be too much of a fanboy, but Plato really is brilliant. So anyway, keep in mind, he realized there was an unconscious way before anyone else. But also this idea, the hermeneutics of suspicion, that too you see in Plato. Now look, I'm not saying this is right. Thrasymachus puts a lot of pressure on Socrates puts a lot of pressure on Thrasymachus, and I think we should take that seriously. But it's also worth taking this skeptical challenge seriously. So anyway, next lecture we'll go into a bit more depth what this looks like, what proof Thrasymachus can offer for these really radical claims.